The courtroom was supposed to be a place of justice, but that day, it became a stage for humiliation. Cameras were rolling as a woman stood alone, facing sharp words, mocking looks, and open abuse from those who were meant to protect the law. No one spoke up. No one stopped it. Every second felt heavier than the last, and it seemed like power had already decided the outcome. But what no one realized was that those same cameras were capturing everything. And within moments, the balance of power would shift in a way no one expected. What happened next didn't just change the case. It silenced the courtroom, exposed the truth, and turned abuse into accountability. This is the story of how justice, when caught on camera, turned the tables in seconds. The courtroom was already tense before anything went wrong. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting a pale glow over wooden benches filled with quiet spectators. The woman stood alone at the defendant's table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles white. She wore a plain blouse, slightly wrinkled, as if she'd slept in it after another sleepless night. Her eyes stayed low, fixed on the floor, avoiding the stares that burned into her from every direction. The officers entered with confidence, too much confidence. Their boots echoed loudly, deliberately, as if to remind everyone who held power in this room. One of them smirked when he saw her. Another whispered something, and the others chuckled. It wasn't subtle, wasn't accidental, it was calculated. When she tried to speak, just a quiet attempt to explain the interruption came instantly. A sharp voice cut her off. An officer raised his hand dismissively, telling her to be quiet in a tone meant to belittle, not instruct. Laughter rippled through part of the room. Someone shook their head. Someone else sighed impatiently. She froze. Her lips parted, then closed again. Years of being talked over, ignored, and dismissed collapsed onto her shoulders in that moment. Her breathing grew shallow. She felt small, smaller than she had in a long time. Then it escalated. One officer leaned closer than necessary, invading her space. His voice was louder now, aggressive, accusing. He mocked her explanation, twisted her words, exaggerated her gestures. Another officer rolled his eyes dramatically, shaking his head as if she were wasting everyone's time. The humiliation was public, intentional, and absolute. What none of them realized, what no one in the courtroom noticed, was the small black camera mounted high in the corner of the room. It blinked quietly, recording everything. The judge hadn't arrived yet. Without authority present, the officers behaved as if the room belonged to them. One of them laughed openly now, gesturing toward her as though she were part of some cruel joke. The woman's face flushed. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She refused to cry. Not here, not like this. She straightened her back, just slightly. The humiliation continued, each second stretching longer than the last. The room felt heavy, suffocating. A few spectators shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Silence can be louder than cruelty and more painful. Then, finally, the courtroom doors opened. The judge entered. Conversation stopped. Laughter vanished. The officers stepped back into place, suddenly composed, suddenly professional. Shift was instant, like masks snapping into position. The woman looked up for the first time, hope flickering faintly in her eyes. The judge took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and glanced around the room. Something in his expression suggested he already sensed tensions, something wrong. Proceedings began, said the case unfolded. The officers spoke confidently, recounting their version of events. Their voices were smooth, practiced. They painted the woman as uncooperative, emotional, unreliable. Each word pushed her further into the corner they'd built for her. But then something unexpected happened. The judge paused. He leaned forward slightly and asked a simple question, one that made the room go quiet again. Was this entire interaction recorded? The officers exchanged brief glances. A beat passed. And in that silence, the power in the room began to shift, unseen, unstoppable. Justice was already moving quietly toward the truth. The courtroom atmosphere shifted subtly after the footage stopped playing. What moments ago had been a place of authority and routine now felt exposed, almost vulnerable. The woman remained standing, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes were steady. She wasn't pleading anymore. She was waiting. Waiting for the system to decide whether it would protect its own or finally protect the truth. The judge leaned forward, his expression no longer neutral. He asked for the video to be replayed, this time slower, frame by frame. Each second revealed more than words ever could, the mocking tone, The unnecessary force, the smirks exchanged by officers who believed they were untouchable. A murmur rippled through the courtroom benches as people began to realize this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was abuse, recorded clearly, undeniably. The defense attorney tried to regain control, clearing his throat, insisting context mattered. He spoke of procedure, stress, and misinterpretation. But the room no longer belonged to him. The truth had already claimed it. The woman's lawyer stood, calm but resolute, pointing out timestamps, gestures, and contradictions in the officer's earlier statements. One by one, their words began to crumble under the weight of their own actions. The woman finally sat down, her body exhausted but her spirit burning. For the first time since her arrest, she felt seen as a suspect, not as a problem, but as a human being who had been wronged. Her memory replayed the moment she was laughed at, the moment fear tightened her chest, the moment she realized silence would destroy her. And now, silence was no longer hers. Alone it belonged to everyone who had watched the video. One of the officers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Another stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The confidence they once carried was gone, replaced by the realization that cameras do not forget, and truth does not negotiate. The judge called a short recess, but no one moved. The tension was too thick, the reckoning too close. Outside the courtroom doors, reporters gathered, whispers turning into urgent conversations. Word spread quickly, this wasn't just another case. This was a moment. A moment where power had been challenged, and the system was being forced to look at itself. Inside, the woman closed her eyes briefly, breathing deeply. She didn't know how this would end, but she knew something had already changed. The fear was no longer louder than her courage. When the judge returned, his voice carried a new gravity, spoke of accountability, of trust, of the responsibility worn by those in uniform. And as he spoke, the woman understood something profound. Justice doesn't always arrive loudly, but when it does, it leaves no room for denial. The courtroom that had once echoed with mockery now felt tense, like a storm about to break. The woman sat silently beside her attorney, her hands folded, her face calmed, but her eyes told a different story. They carried the weight of humiliation, yes, but also something new, resolve. The video evidence had already been acknowledged, yet no one knew how deeply it would cut until the next few moments unfolded. The judge leaned forward, requesting the footage to be played again, this time in full, without interruptions. The screen flickered, the room darkened slightly. Every whisper died instantly. The video showed what words never could. It's the officer's laughter, the sarcastic remarks, the way her dignity was stripped piece by piece while she stood powerless. One officer mocked her accent. Another rolled his eyes when she tried to explain herself. A third leaned too close, smirking, enjoying the imbalance of power. This time, the camera angle revealed something new, a clear view of the officers' faces. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. A woman in the audience covered her mouth. A man shook his head slowly, unable to look away. Even seasoned attorneys shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't just misconduct, it was cruelty, documented in high definition. The prosecutor stood up abruptly, requesting a pause. His voice, once confident, now trembled. He attempted to redirect the focus, arguing procedure, technicalities, intent. But the judge raised a single hand. "Sit down," the judge said firmly. The words landed like a gavel strike. The judge's eyes never left the screen as the video continued. When it ended, the silence was unbearable. No coughs, no movement, just the hum of the projector cooling down. Then the judge spoke. "This court does not tolerate abuse of power," he said slowly, "especially when it targets those already vulnerable." He turned his gaze toward the officers. Gone was the casual authority they had entered with. They now looked exposed, small, uncomfortable, and unmistakably afraid. One officer tried to speak, to explain, to soften what had been seen. The judge cut him off mid-sentence. "You had authority," the judge said sharply, "and you used it to humiliate, not to uphold the law." The defense attorney rose next, her voice steady but fierce. She spoke not only of the video, but of Pattern's prior complaints, dismissed reports, ignored warnings. Each sentence peeled back another layer of systemic abuse. The woman at the center of it all finally stood. She wasn't asked to, she chose to. Her voice was quiet, but the courtroom leaned in to hear her. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said. "I came here because I believed the law would protect me. That day it didn't. But today, maybe it will protect someone else." Her words landed harder than any accusation. The judge nodded slowly. At that moment, justice shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but undeniably. The power had moved from those who abused it to the one who endured and spoke. The judge announced immediate consequences. The officers were suspended pending investigation, their actions referred for criminal review. The courtroom erupted not in chaos, but in murmurs of stunned disbelief. The officers were escorted out, no longer in control, no longer above scrutiny. The woman sat back down, her shoulders trembling not from fear but release. For the first time, she wasn't the one being watched. She was the one being heard. And everyone in that courtroom knew. The tables had turned, and there was no turning back. The room had grown tense, every eye fixed on the unfolding truth. After hours of silence, the final piece of evidence was presented, and the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The woman, who had been humiliated, hurt, and ignored for too long, now stood at the center of attention not as a victim, but as a force that could no longer be dismissed. Her courage in speaking the truth, combined with the irrefutable video evidence, created a ripple through the room that even the most confident officials could not ignore. The judge, previously stern and unyielding, leaned forward, eyes scanning the footage again, confirming what everyone had seen, abuse and injustice that could no longer be hidden. Whispers erupted among the spectators, shock and disbelief mixing with a sense of anticipation. The air was heavy with tension, but also charged with possibility, the possibility that justice, long delayed, could finally prevail. Witnesses who had hesitated to speak earlier now found courage in her resolve. The prosecutor, once calm and composed, now presented her arguments with renewed vigor. Using the video as undeniable proof, the woman's story, previously dismissed or overshadowed, was now the focal point. Every detail mattered, the expressions, the tones, the moments captured on camera, all building a narrative to clear the dispute. As the courtroom absorbed the truth, the woman's eyes met the judge's, and in that silent exchange, there was understanding. She had faced humiliation, intimidation, and fear, yet she had emerged stronger. The room seemed to shift her bravery, reshaping the atmosphere, turning disbelief into recognition, fear into accountability. Finally, the judge spoke, his words measured but powerful. They marked a turning point, a moment where authority and law aligned with morality and fairness. The tables had turned. What had started as a scene of humiliation now became a declaration. Injustice would not prevail here. Applause and murmurs of approval rippled through the courtroom, subtle but significant, acknowledging the triumph of truth and courage. Backstage and beyond the courtroom doors, the implications of this victory began to settle. The woman had not just won a case, she had inspired others to stand, speak, and demand accountability. Her journey from fear to empowerment became a testament to the strength of perseverance and the unyielding power of truth. The video that was meant to humiliate her had instead immortalized her bravery, turning an act of cruelty into a catalyst for justice. As the courtroom emptied, she walked out with dignity and calm, a quiet hero whose story would resonate far beyond these walls. Justice had turned the tables, and with it, a clear message was sent. Courage and truth are forces that can never be silenced. The courtroom was finally emptying, but the impact of what had unfolded lingered in every mind present. What began as humiliation and injustice had transformed into a powerful lesson. Courage, truth, and perseverance can overturn even the darkest moments. The woman who had been mocked and belittled now walked with dignity, her strength and resilience recognized by all. Her story was no longer just hers. It had become a beacon for anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of wrongdoing. This moment reminds us that standing up for what is right, even when it feels impossible, can create ripples that reach far beyond ourselves. Every act of bravery matters, and every voice, when combined with truth, can change the course of events. If this story inspired you, shocked you, or moved you, subscribe to our channel for more real-life, emotional, and powerful stories. Like the video to support it reaching more viewers, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and comment below your thoughts. What would you have done in her place? Remember, justice may take time, but courage and truth will always prevail. Stay tuned for more stories that touch hearts, awaken bravery, and reveal the strength within us all.